One of the biggest geopolitical blunders of this administration has been Donald Trump bailing on the Iran nuclear deal, importantly, without Iran having violated the deal, which was, of course, signed under President Barack Obama. And you might remember, as many people did, Trump opposed the deal under Obama. Lots of right wingers did that, and that's fine. But once a deal's signed, willy-nilly canceling it when you're elected president absent any cause to do so based on what's in the deal is not a good idea. And I've said this before, if other countries can't trust that the United States is going to stick to the deals that we make, even when a president changes, when the party in the controlling the White House changes, there is no incentive to deal with us. There is no incentive to treat us correctly. It's geopolitically a disaster. And that's exactly what it has been. I also told you several weeks ago that Iran, completely predictably, is now resuming nuclear research and development, possibly for nuclear energy, possibly for nuclear weapons, which of course I don't want them to have. But the point is, they're resuming enrichment of uranium, which I don't want them to do. But given the circumstances, it's perfectly logical, it's perfectly rational, and it's what we would expect that they would do. Iran knows that if they are not, if the United States has bailed on the Iran nuclear deal, they are better off, no matter what happens in the future, starting to enrich uranium again. Either they start enriching uranium so that in the future it becomes a negotiating point for a future deal, or they start enriching uranium either to develop nuclear power or nuclear weapons, because if they understand history, they know that historically having nuclear weapons has been a strong positioning item, it has been strong for the positioning of nations. And there are numerous examples that we can look at, and those include, we've talked about Iraq, we've talked about many others. So it's completely predictable that it's what Iran would do. I don't want them to do it, but I get why they're doing it. And what Donald Trump is now doing is trying to have it both ways. Trump has bailed on the deal. He has pulled the United States out of the Iran nuclear deal, but at the same time is demanding that Iran stick to the deal unless they want to face further consequences for not sticking to the deal. And here's the loophole that the Trump administration is trying to use to justify this nonsense. What the U.S. is saying is that even though we pulled out of the deal, there are other countries that are still in the deal. And this is, of course, the height of absurdity. Donald Trump backed the United States out of the Iran nuclear deal. It was a coalition deal. So the argument they're making is the U.S. is out, but Iran is still in the deal with the UK and with France and with Germany. And of course, on a technical level, that may be, but then it's up to those countries to demand that Iran comply. Donald Trump and the United States have no credibility whatsoever to even ask for that at this point in time. And even worse is that the United States has actually made it almost impossible for the other countries to keep working with Iran on compliance. So Donald Trump has sort of put himself into a very strange and idiotic corner, but specifically a corner that lacks all credibility on the issue. And unfortunately, and this really is a problem, there are news outlets that are reporting that Iran would be in violation of the deal if they do this or if they did that. Trump ripped up the agreement. It makes it hard for other countries to keep it going when Donald Trump does that. And then yet he still insists that Iran has to stick with the deal. And more importantly, maybe, we're used to Trump's hypocrisy and idiocy and ignorance domestically. But geopolitically, this starts to put Europe once again potentially at odds with the United States, because ultimately those other countries, the European signatories to the Iran deal, might have to say, we agree with the U.S., even though Trump backed out, the deal with us is still on and Iran needs to abide by it. That would be taking Trump's side when it comes to this disagreement. Or the European signatories might say, even though this is a multi-part deal, by ripping it up as far as American involvement, the deal is effectively dead. And we really have no sort of compliance authority to enforce that Iran stick to it. And this is yet another one of these examples of how the United States will be pitted against Europe. And we've talked about this before. When the U.S. and Europe are at odds, this is a win for Putin, who wants to put a wedge between the United States and our allies. A lot of Putin's prerogatives and priorities when it comes to NATO relate to driving a wedge between the United States and Europe. This relates to so much of what we've been talking about over the last couple of years. And it's not this cartoonish Trump and Putin colluding thing. It's that Donald Trump doesn't even have the wherewithal and the knowledge and the intelligence, quite frankly, to even understand the ways in which his actions and statements regarding Europe and other allies, and his looking away when it's convenient to look away from authoritarian leaders doing absolutely terrible things, it all fits into a politic that benefits Vladimir Putin in a world in which Russia and China are increasingly aligned to the detriment of the United States as sort of the third leg of the superpowers, the three growing geopolitical superpowers. And we've talked about this many, many times before. It doesn't have to be Trump colluding with Putin to be executing a politic that benefits Putin in ways that Russia has been thinking about and talking about at least for 2+ decades, if not longer. This, in the end, is going to be what it's about. We'd be better off if Donald Trump had not backed out of the deal. Iran would be further back in their nuclear development. Everyone would be safer with an Iran that is still part of the deal and complying with the Iran nuclear deal. Instead, we have an Iran that is newly invigorated in its nuclear development. There are new discussions of war with Iran on the table, and it's absolutely absurd and utterly embarrassing on the national stage, which has basically been the theme of this administration. If you disagree, let me know. I want to hear from you about the Iran nuclear deal, about Iran's actions in resuming enrichment of uranium, about the context in which Putin likes the idea of the United States at odds with Europe, about what does or doesn't Iran have to do with regard to what is remaining, the tatters of the Iran nuclear deal. Let me know what you think.